I'm going to start, Andrew, by asking you about your attraction to this particular story. It's your first feature film made in the US, and there's an incredibly palpable sense of place and a very poetic sense of place here. Can you tell us a little bit about what attracted you to this particular story?
I think in the end, I just fell in love with the novel, and it was almost as simple as that. And I loved the story of Charlie, and I kind of fell in love with that journey of his and the struggle that he was having. And it just really kind of, even though my life is obviously very different than Charlie's, I couldn't get him out of my mind, really. And, you know, I suppose I've wanted to make a film in America for a long time, and it always intrigues me, and I'm kind of fascinated and appalled and amazed and all those kind of things with America. But, you know, I spent a long time driving around. I spent like 4 months preparing, like 4 years before we actually made the film, driving to the locations, trying to get a sense of it. And yeah, it just felt like it just spoke to me in a way that most material doesn't.
You talked about that sense of loneliness in your introduction. I think one of the things that's incredibly powerful about the film is that we experience that in a very specific way through Charlie's story, but at the same time, there's a sense of this being a much bigger piece, if you like, a sort of more representative of a larger sort of social kind of issue. Can you talk a bit about the tension between those two things?
Yeah, well, I mean, I always liked that it felt a very kind of intimate story still about one boy's struggle, essentially, to find a home, to find stability, to find somewhere that he can feel safe and kind of secure. But I also liked what that said about a wider kind of issue of, you know, people on the margins falling through the net and having no one to kind of protect them. And so it felt like it was making, I suppose, a political statement, but on a small kind of intimate level, which to me is, you know, for me personally, is the best way to tell those kind of stories.
Tristan, this is the third of Andrew's 4 features that you've produced. Did it pose a new set of challenges for you in terms of, you know, this very different kind of material?
We had to make it in the US, which poses its own challenges. We had to work with 30 horses at some points. We had to work with this child here, who doesn't really count as a child, as it turns out. Yeah, it comes to a whole bunch of logistical challenges, but it was just exciting for us to go out there and do it. And because of the time that Andrew spent there before, because of the generosity of the author, Willy Vlautin, into introducing us into the world, and because of having such an amazing actor in that lead role, it really was kind of a joy to make it in the end.
Charlie, a huge congratulations on your very deserved award at the Venice Film Festival as well. I think you make this performance look actually deceptively simple. There is an incredible sort of poignancy to it, and I think it's very difficult as an actor to actually convey this interior world. It's very much an interior story. Can you talk about how you went into the character of Charlie, and also I think, you know, some of my treasured scenes from this film are those scenes that you have kind of alone with the horse, and you know, here is a creature who is not kind of communicating with you via language, but you develop a sort of relationship with that horse. Can you talk a bit about those two things?
Certainly. To talk first about the internal aspect of it, I think that really just reflected Andrew's work and the way that he likes to work, and certainly the way that I like to work and I prefer to work, and I feel most at home. And I think as soon as I had seen his first 2, or the 2 other films, I really completely understood, you know, the way he was going to do it, and then having conversations with him, it really just felt right to me because it felt honest to me. So. And then working with the horse and those scenes that, you know, there might not be dialogue going on, I thought, you know, of course I was working opposite another creature, and you know, I'd be remiss in saying that it, you know, there wasn't something happening and there wasn't a connection there, because there absolutely was, and especially with such an emotionally intelligent animal or just creature such as a horse, and especially this one, Starsky. And so, you know, I think Andrew is just a courageous filmmaker in that he will be confident enough to just leave the camera there, and while it might not appear that much is going on, he really lets you see all that's going on, and I really, admire him for that alone.
And Andrew, can I ask you a little bit about the sort of additional cast members, Steve Buscemi and Chloe Sevigny, who give such great performances here, and the sort of the context, this kind of, sort of very sort of run-down sense of almost like an old Americana around the racetracks.
Yeah, I mean, the racetracks there are really fascinating. It really is very low-level racing. No one's making any money at all. It's kind of a very difficult life. And what I love about both Chloe and Steve is I feel like they can embed themselves, even though they're pretty famous, they can embed themselves in the world really well. And they're both essentially character actors. And I think they just did an amazing job at being part of that world and also understanding that this was Charlie's story. I think for a lot of, more famous actors, it can be quite a struggle sometimes if you're not the star of the show. But they were so generous and kind and open, and they knew what the story was. They knew that it was Charlie's story, and they were really quite joyous to work with.
Other questions in the audience? We have one here. Can we have a mic here? There's one in the middle here. We'll take that. Any more? So we'll go here first.
I'm from Laramie.
Oh, sorry, we don't have the mic on.
How do I turn this on? I'm sorry, I can't see very well.
It might just not have been mixed up. Try it now.
Okay, is it on?
Yeah, it's
That's
on.
it.
Okay, sorry. I'm from Laramie, Wyoming. I'm a Democratic voter from Laramie, Wyoming. I'm from Laramie. And this this wasn't Laramie.
Unfortunately, it wasn't.
No.
I did go to Laramie on my trip.
Because Laramie's beautiful.
Laramie is beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It's gorgeous.
It is. It's a gorgeous place, and full of lots of nice people too.
Yeah.
But we couldn't. I mean, it's also not Denver when they go to Denver. Like in the end, I think both me and Tristan would love to have filmed in all the real locations, but budgetary-wise, we just couldn't. So we had to pretend that it was Laramie. So I'm sorry.
I haven't read the books.
Yeah.
But being from the West, there's a lot of good people in the West. And the film kind of made us all look like drunken rednecks hurting each other and not very nice, and every now and then you'd find a waitress who was nice. Is that sort of the tone of the book, or was that...
It is the tone of the book. Well, I mean, to me, I don't think they are bad people in this story. I think for me, they're all struggling and finding their lives very difficult. So I think we certainly didn't ever want them to be portrayed as rednecks. If that's, I hate that term.
We're not all drunks and living in trailer parks. And
no, exactly. But also, this is, he is... lost in the middle of nowhere, and the places he turns up are not, perhaps the best places in the world. But I think it was very important that nobody was vilified for their actions, even Silver at the end, who does some shitty things. Hopefully, I personally can sympathise with all of the characters. People are driven to things for very different reasons that we can't always understand.
Yeah, and I think, sorry to add to that, I think for me, every single person that Charlie meets on that journey is kind and tries to be kind to him, but every one of them has a limit to their kindness because of the desperation of their own situation. And the world within which he moves is very particular. It's a very specific story. It's about that specific character and that specific journey that he goes through. Certainly not everybody in the US, but I think what is important, and the reason Andrew was drawn to it in the first place, and the reason I was excited to make this film, is that it is a story about the way that so many of us have forgotten the most vulnerable in society, and that's what ultimately the story is trying to tap into.
The question in the
Hello?
the person with the mic, and sorry, could we just get a mic down to this guy here too, please? Yeah,
Hi.
go ahead.
Okay. First of all, I have got a question, but I'd just like to say 2 years ago I saw 45 Years at the cinema, and I was so affected by the end. I ran from the cinema to where my girlfriend worked to let her know that I loved her. And I wanted to thank you for giving me that really special moment in my life. So thank you very much for that.
It's a pleasure.
And obviously, we've seen Charlie as phenomenal, but I think everybody in the cast is stunning. Even people who have only like 3 or 4 lines. And myself, I'm an actor, writer, director, just starting out. I want to know, how do you work with actors? How do you direct them? I'm really interested to know how you got these amazing performances out of them.
Yeah, Charlie can probably tell you more, but for me, it's almost just like giving them space to be able to do what they do. I mean, I don't know how to act. I can't act to save my life. And, you know, I think it's an incredible thing that people do. And you just have to cast the right people and trust that they can do it. And then, you know, you work together and you create an environment that means that they can do their best work and you can do your best work. I mean, that's, to me, it's just how I am with them. Maybe Charlie can offer any insight.
I would just agree with that. I think that, I mean, as a director, Andrew just trusted me so much and also trusted everyone else to, like he said, you know, do what we do. And I think whenever he, you know, would want it in a little bit of a different direction, he would just say that little piece and it would always move along so clearly. But yeah, I don't have too much to add on that one.
What sort of process did you go through, Charlie? I mean, did you kind of have a period of rehearsal, or did you go straight into a kind of shooting environment?
I arrived in Portland where we shot the majority of the film about 3 weeks before, and I that was mostly to train with the horse Starsky, and then the rest of it was all on film, and yeah, I think too. I mean, Andrew doesn't rehearse very often. And he doesn't do too many takes, and you'll probably notice from watching the film there aren't too many setups ever, and I think that also just helped me so much as an actor to feel free with what I was doing and to be able to stay so in the moment every single time, especially with the other actors.
So the chap here.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to this woman here who I don't agree with at all, and I'm from America myself, and I think that we're heading towards a place where people are going to be forgotten. And this story to me was about forgotten people, and in a very strong, moving way. I love what Chloe says, that she's a woman who's broken her back 5 times, but yet she gets up and does it, which is part of the American spirit, but I must say, good-willed, tax-paying people are going to find themselves in America wanting just to be cared for. So I think this is a really timely, beautiful story about finding that place where they could be cared for. So thank you for it.
Thank you. Thanks. And there is something to me about when I looked at this project, it spoke to me about the American dream, even though it might not be saving the people it should be saving, which clearly it isn't. There is kind of hope inherent in the American dream that I feel like Charlie as a character keeps with him. And I do find that quite fascinating and interesting. And I do think for me, this was always a film that was driven by hope, even if it's not necessarily a hopeful film. And I do think that is part of the kind of American way, is sticking with that hope. So hopefully things can get better.
There's a question right up in the back corner over here.
Hi, I thought it was an amazing movie. You always have an incredible music in your movies, so I'm wondering how you decided for World's Greatest at the... I mean, that's a great song, but, how did you choose that one?
Yeah, I mean, I'd liked the song for a while, and I'd had the Bonnie Prince Billy album that it came from when it came out, but I just found it very interesting because it's an R. Kelly cover, and so the R. Kelly version is a very kind of bombastic, ode to America, you know, and the Bonnie Prince Billy version is obviously the same words, but is drenched in a kind of sadness but also a possibility, but still a kind of melancholy. So I just like that contradiction for the end, and I feel like for me the story couldn't be too clean cut at the end. You know, this is a kid that's gone through atrocious, hideous things, and life is better for him, but it's certainly not rosy going forward. And he'll have to almost come of age after this story in how he deals with everything that's happened. And so that song, to me, just kind of spoke to that kind of contradiction almost.
Time for one last question, just down here. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. Congratulations on a superb movie. I was just really wondering how much input did the author Willy Vlautin have in the film at all?
Yeah, Willy was really helpful. Like when we got the rights, I went and stayed with him in Portland for a while, and he, knows the backside of the track really well. He's basically gambled a lot and knows them all pretty well. So, I spent time with him meeting jockeys and trainers and all the people that lived in those, the backside. We went to a bunch of fairs with him, county fairs where you see some of the racing. And then when I was writing the script, I would send him drafts, and, it's a tough thing. The book is quite, there's a lot more in the book, and so you have to take stuff out, which I loved. And he was very open about discussing what I was changing, what I was taking out, and then if I was adding dialogue and it sounded terrible, he would say, "This is shit, don't put that in." So he was really helpful. He was there on set a lot and would always be nice, in certain scenes, we'd turn around and we'd see Willy, crying at the monitor. So he's a very sensitive, nice, wonderful man. So he was great.
Will you please join me in thanking and congratulating Andrew, Tristan, and
Thank you
Charlie.
very much. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.